You know, we weren't here last year, so we've spent 2 years getting ready for this. So I hope you all have a great time. Let's give it up for the amazing people who produce Green Festival. And give it up to all of you who are here. Thank you so much. On behalf of Green America and Global Exchange, we do want to welcome you. This is our 8th annual Washington, D.C. Green Festival, and we are the nation's premier sustainability event, now in our 11th year in cities across the country. Thank you. Yeah. Green Festival is very special because it's produced by 2 nonprofits. Our organization, Green America, that I have the great pleasure of being with for 30 years this week. And thank you. Yeah. And Global Exchange, who's a human rights organization out of San Francisco. I encourage you to stop by both of our booths there in the front and find out more about us. If you're not already a member of our organizations, please stop by, talk to our teams, and find out all the other work that we do in these areas of a green economy and social justice movements. I also want to remind you that all the businesses that are here have been screened by Green America's Green Business Standards. So you can be assured that they are truly the green thing. And I know that many of you are inundated with green messaging all the time. So you can be assured that what we have here have really passed our screens. So we really also ask you to support them. It is a difficult time in the economy, and it affects small businesses, and particularly green businesses. So please support them during this season with your, if you are so inclined to spend money while you're here. So please spend it with these great businesses. We also want to thank our 1,000 volunteers that have come out to support this event and be great and make it very welcoming for all of you. And they're doing the resource recovery. So let's give it up to our 1,000 volunteers. And also our host committee. I know there's a number of you that have worked on this event all year, and this is our DC host committee, so thank you so much. We want you to make sure that you stop by the Ford booth, the community booth. We have 5 amazing local nonprofits that are vying for your attention, and also the $5,000 award that Ford will be giving them. So thank you so much, Ford. And if you haven't test-driven this all-electric vehicle, you can do it at this event. Sign up at there, and they can take you downstairs, and you can test drive the 100% electric vehicle. Okay? You gonna do that? And then you're going to go and buy it. Great. So let's thank Ford Community Green Grants, New York Times, National Children's Museum, the NAACP are all of our partners here, as well as Earth Balance, Repass, Cliff Bar, Raw Juice, Sustain You, Book Publishing, Mom's Organic Market, National Aquarium. Let's give it up for our wonderful partners. Our media partners, Democracy Now! And guess who's going to be up after the Kucinich? Amy's going to be here. Natural Health, Sierra Club, the Organic and Non-GMO Report, and Spirituality and Health, Georgetowner Magazine. These are some of our media partners, and we have hundreds of them. So thank them and support them in their work. So you've all come here to hear the amazing message that Dennis Kucinich and his wife Elizabeth have. I had the great pleasure of starting my career as a very young, naive, and energetic, I think 17 or 18-year-old, when I took to the streets of Cleveland, Ohio, to run and work with him on their first mayoral campaign in Cleveland, which resulted in him being the youngest mayor of Cleveland. Yes, and that was just a few years ago. And all of you, how I know, have supported Dennis Kucinich. Congressman Dennis Kucinich from Ohio's 10th District. He has worked tirelessly challenging illegal and unnecessary wars and U.S. militarism, promoting honest democracy, and a focus on domestic priorities such as financial reform, single-payer health care, education, true green jobs in our community, and a cabinet-level Department of Peace. Dennis recently founded www.KucinichAction.com. His wife, Elizabeth Kucinich, who is with him today, is Director of Government Affairs for Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Her work focuses on disease prevention and reversal through vegan nutrition. She serves on the board of the Rodell Institute and Sean Penn's work on humanitarian work in Haiti. She's co-producing a new film called GMOfilm.com, and you can find out more about that. So would you join me in a warm Green Festival welcome for the great congressman from the great state of Ohio and his
so great to see this enormous crowd, and Dennis and I are thrilled to join you. We are just so heartened and so deeply appreciative of all of you here who have come to humbly listen to us, but also for all of the people who have these stalls here, because you really are making the difference, creating that cultural space for all of us to step into, to be able to change the way we live and to live with integrity. And as we start our little conversation with you, and we want it to be a conversation, we'd really like to talk to you, to hear from you, to hear what your hearts are calling and what you're doing, and really create a community feel here. I want to take you on a little journey, and this is my journey to start with, and then I'll hand over to Dennis. But as a child, I was always brought up with the feeling to turn a negative thought into a positive action. And it wasn't actually a feeling, it was a teaching by my mother, who happens to be sitting in the front here. Julia, will you stand up, Mum? So my mum always said to me, because I had this deep feeling when I saw that there was injustice, when there was pain, environmental degradation, that you always turn a negative thought into a positive action. Wherever you see pain, you're trying to create love. And so my mother has created a healing and teaching centre in England after her journey, where she had Crohn's disease, and the doctors couldn't really do anything for her except say that she had to have radical surgery. And she said, no, I don't actually believe what you're telling me. And she went off and researched nutrition, and we changed to having a whole grain, plant-based diet. My mother cured herself of Crohn's disease. So my mother's own healing journey was the beginning step of obviously my growth and my movement into the world as an activist, because through her journey we became active in animal issues and compassion issues. And so as a child I was trying to always go up to Congress, not Congress but to Parliament in London, and from the age of 8 we were demonstrating. And I would skip school, sorry Mum, I would skip school, and with letters that I would go and hand deliver to members of Parliament in London to try and take action on different animal issues. And that was the thing that I did that was very naughty as a child. But I always watched Princess Diana on the television, and Mother Teresa, and saw India. And so as soon as I left high school, I literally just bought an airline ticket and I flew to India. And I worked with street people there, and then I came back to London, and I worked for the Green Party as a volunteer. And one day, when I was there stuffing envelopes, and bored out of my head, we received this notification saying, well, there is this meeting that's taking place in the Friends Meeting House, and it's about monetary policy. I had no idea about monetary policy whatsoever. But it was that time when I was 18-year-old, it was that little action of going to that meeting that 9 years later took me to meet Dennis Kucinich. And that's how we met. So everything that we do, all our little steps of activism are taking us on a path. And we're now in a time of great transition. There's great opportunity, and there's also great disaster. There's great wealth, and there's also great poverty. And we are living in this time of dichotomy, which is very difficult for some of us to find and navigate our own way. And much of that turns into frustration against religion, or frustration against the political system, and all of that in the end becomes debilitating. But in meeting Dennis, I found great joy in my life in being active. I found great joy in being able to connect heart and motivation and passion with the spirit, because I really believe that spirit, when it comes down into matter, has the opportunity to transform it. And when we are born with this feeling in our hearts, or we're awakened to that, when we bring the power of our own being into everything that we do, we're able to transform our own life and the world around us, in our smaller communities, and potentially in the greater world for the greater good. And with that, I would like to pass my comments on to Dennis.
Good afternoon. Elizabeth and I are honored to have the opportunity to be here for this Green Festival, to have a conversation with you, to talk about the evolution of green thinking. As Elizabeth began, we're living in a time of great change and great possibilities. Perhaps that's always been true. But we also know that the technological advances that have taken place in our society have often separated us from nature. If you look at the splitting of the atom, the creation of the atomic bomb, if you look at the genetically modified organisms, if you look even at cellular technology, which some of you are using right now, there are technological underpinnings that in some way help to distance us from our health, from an understanding of our deeper nature. The philosopher Thomas Berry said the great work of our lives should be about reconciling with nature. And that's very difficult to do today. In a way, all war is an assault on nature. It's ecocide. War destroys our humanity. It destroys our external environment. And yet it's become so commonplace, we accept thinking unconsciously about the inevitability of war, and at the same time, we know deep in our hearts that the disconnection which it represents is not who we are. And so we're at a moment in human history where all the great questions are before us again as to who we are, as to where we go, as to what our potential is, as to whether or not we can catch that evolutionary impulse which green thinking represents and take it to create a new world. And so Elizabeth and I have had the opportunity in our respective capacities to be able to take this transformative thinking, this idea that spirit, when it goes into matter, sanctifies it, elevates it. I'm not talking about religion here. I'm talking about spirituality. It's different. I'm talking about an understanding of the fundamental truth of our existence, which is that we are all one. If there is one thing that underscores green thinking, green philosophy, it's the idea of human unity. It's that we are interconnected and interdependent. And acting from that, we do things that reinforce our common brotherhood and sisterhood. And that we step back or challenge those things, as the case may be, which tries to separate us. It's been my belief that when the atomic bomb was created, and worse than when it was dropped, that it represented a form of dichotomized thinking of us versus them, whoever they are. And if you look at our politics today, more than anything, it reflects these dichotomies. It doesn't talk about our potential. It doesn't speak to our higher instincts. It doesn't show us how we can keep reaching. It doesn't give us the ability to connect with something transcendent, which we all yearn for. It becomes a slog, a daily plodding along. And yet that's not what life is meant to be. And it's a green vision of our society, which takes us along the path where we can claim the happiness that is our innate gift, where we can claim the beauty that belongs to us innately, and where we can set in motion a plan, the work of our lives, to reconcile with nature and to reconcile with each other. We're at this moment of great transformation. And this is not just a collective decision, it's an individual decision as well. Before I go bring this to you, I'd just like to share with you my own path towards connecting with green principles as far as eating. That I'm a vegan today didn't just happen. I had a journey where I had Crohn's as a young person, and it was very destructive, and it was life-threatening. And yet by changing diet,
Hold on. Tell them what you ate.
I'm done.
Tell them what you ate before you talk about the transition.
Oh yeah, well what I ate, I thought that was like the voice of God.
It is done.
Well, from my conventional diet, steak and eggs for breakfast, right? Half dozen donuts, bowl of cereal. I thought that was like a high-energy breakfast, right? I wondered why at about 9 o'clock I was ready to fall asleep again.
He always wanted to be the big man in town.
Yes, hey. And yet, because I changed my diet, and this was in 1995, I suddenly became aware not only of the chance to improve my own health, which it did, but also of the choices that people make out of compassion, because one's diet informs compassion or not. Out of sustainability, our diets inform or potentiate a sustainable culture, and then our own health. So it's hard to talk about these things unless you've experienced them yourself. And it's really true of anything that I talked about here. It's about my own experience, not theoretical. And so
this presentation was meant to be about veganism and looking at health to activism. So has anyone looked at their own diets, and and this isn't sort of, don't worry about engaging, but it's not like Alcoholics Anonymous, but who of you are vegans in the audience? That's wonderful. And without feeling any pressure, anybody who's looked at being vegetarian or played with other aspects of their diets or curious about nutrition? So obviously that's wonderful. That's great. So we're here really, we understand, as do most of you I'm sure, that our diets and what we choose to eat when we eat are probably the most impactful decisions that we make every single day, and if we're lucky enough 3 times or more a day, when we choose what we're going to eat. If it's plant-based, we know that it's not caused any suffering to an animal, but we also know that it's not causing so much suffering to our own bodies. But we believe that we need to love ourselves in order to be able to love the world and to be able to transform. So we need to be able to transform ourselves. Now, this isn't proselytizing or missionizing. This really is showing a path of what is possible. So many people today have type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure or are overweight or have high cholesterol. And all of these things generally come from a diet that's heavy in meat and dairy. We also know that meats and dairy is also very addictive. So if people have tried to change route, down the route of cutting down on meat, cutting down on cheese, it doesn't matter if you fail every now and again. This is a journey. This isn't a religion. This is about trying to improve your life and your health. But foods can be addictive, and cheese in particular has a kind of a protein called casein. And when we digest that, casein gets broken down and it creates casomorphine, which is a kind of drug to us. It's a low-level drug. And of course, we're all pleasure seekers. And this is a low-level morphine, which causes great pleasure and stimulation to our brain. And so we can't break the cheese habit. Don't worry about it. Just cut down and see what happens as you move over. But food and nutrition really are an expression of how we're feeding ourselves, and whether we choose to heal ourselves or whether we choose to damage ourselves, and they are choices. But also, if we look at climate change, and I know probably at the Green Festival many people are concerned with climate change, as I am, and I'm terribly driven by it. And when the United Nations report came out to say that meat production was the highest contributing factor to climate change, that really struck a chord in me. But then I read the report, which came out a couple of years ago, called Climate and Livestock, which was written by a couple of authors who are working at the IMF. And that actually showed that it wasn't 18% of greenhouse gases that were being caused by animal agriculture. It was more like 50% of the greenhouse gases were being created by animal agriculture. And that's an extraordinary number. So if we care about ourselves or not, I know that most of you in the room really care about the environment, so maybe use that as a first step of looking at having diets rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, beans, all of these delicious, yummy things, and I'm sure there are many different stalls around this room who will be able to support a transition if you're just looking into it.
As Elizabeth's speaking, Our bodies, in a sense, are mediators with the environment. In the same way that in the Hindu religion, there are principles of, and excuse me for this may seem like a detour, but I'll bring it in. The principles of Jnanam, Shakti, and Tapasya, these principles have to do with the sense that we are the energy of the stars. That the energy of the stars is in us, and we're the energy of the stars. It's what Einstein, in a sense, it's about the interchangeability of matter. So the individual choices that we make impact on the way the world is they literally impact on the world. That each one of us, each day, makes choices. And as we choose, so chooses the world. We can look at the world externally and complain about it ad infinitum. However, when we think about the choices that we make, it changes everything. Each person in this room who raised their hand that they are vegan, you have had, thank you, you've had experiences in your own life where people would go, vegan? Or somebody in the family say, what's wrong with you? Why are you eating that way? But to take that stand, and then people start paying attention after a while. They're ready to start to change their direction. When I first came to Congress, they have all these repasts after a day of Congress where you can go from one meeting to another, one reception to another, and never have to sit down and have a meal anyway. Most of them are meat. I remember this is one of the first things I went to was a Texas steer roast, okay? So I walked in, there's meat everywhere, and I'm eating the carrots and the celery. That's all I could eat. And one of my friends went over and says, hey, why don't you have some meat? And I said, I don't eat meat. He looks at me and goes, what are you, one of them there communists? And the idea is that if you take a stand, at first it may seem alien to people, but at the same time the curiosity starts to build and people start inquiring about themselves, about their own choice, about their own health. And this is what we're talking about in terms of the choices that we make with the food that we eat, but it's that way in everything. When each time that one of us takes a stand, it causes others to start to ask questions, and if our intention is our own transformation, we actually inform the transformation of others. Let's have, it'd be great if we could have a discussion here. Go to the microphone. Laura O'Connor's at the mic. Laura, anybody have anything that you want to ask?